Hello, everyone. My name is Jason Scott, and I am leading Google's startup developer ecosystem here in the United States. But today, I'm going to take you through OKRs and why objectives and key results are so near and dear to my own heart. So a little bit about me. I've spent a lot of time in startups and venture here at Google, and the one saving grace always for me and my team was having clear, measurable objectives and key results that really teased out and pulled out the most in terms of the impact that we're able to have on ourselves and on our startup ecosystem, but also provided clarity for all of us. And so I'm hopeful that through this workshop today, each of you will give OKRs a try, whether you've tried them before or not, and hopefully pull away a couple of tips and tricks that might help you along in your journey. So the OKR methodology. For those of you who don't know, OKR stand for objectives and key results, and they've been part of Google since the beginning. And they've been a great way for our teams to really, again, maintain that focus, but also optimize our productivity. And so taking you through who and why around OKRs, the who's your audience for OKRs? For us, these can be your advisors. So really helping your advisors, if you're a startup founder, know how to help you and when to help you and how to really focus their time. Of course, you and your teams. So not just you as a leadership team, but also all of the teams throughout your organization, really helping them understand why their work is important and how it aligns to your overall company objectives and goals. But also, one that people often forget is your investors. Many of you probably send monthly, quarterly investor updates, and it's really awesome, similar to your advisors, as an investor to receive a list of, hey, here are the things that the company has found important and are prioritizing for this period. And here are ways that I can focus my help for them, right? Bring out my Rolodex and connect them to someone, or also bring out my experience and really support them in a specific way. And when you're setting the why of OKRs, think about the discipline of your thinking. So OKRs really are allowing for your team to have disciplined thinking around specific goals that they want to accomplish. It allows you to communicate accurately as a leader and really say, hey, these are the things that are important, and here's how we're going to measure the success in achieving those things. Similar to that, establish clear indicators for measuring progress. And so there's no ambiguity around how we're going to measure our success and did we achieve this objective. And then, of course, focusing your efforts. Many of you, potentially CEOs and CTOs and CXOs across your organization, you probably are known, as many of us are, for chasing bright and shiny objects and maybe causing a little bit of distraction of your amongst your team. So OKRs can really be a way for you to not just focus your own efforts, but focus the efforts of your team around clear objectives that you set earlier in that quarter or in that half, and make sure that you maintain that focus throughout the period. So objectives. If you're setting an objective, the one thing you should always know is that objectives should answer, what are you trying to accomplish? They should be meaningful. They should really be inspiring. So think about your new intern, fresh out of undergrad or university, has never had a job before. They should know why the work that they're doing is meaningful and what is the purpose behind it and what is the impact that you as a company and their work as an individual is having on the world. They should be ambitious. I tell all of my founders that if your OKRs do not make you feel uncomfortable, and if you feel that you can confidently say, hey, we can achieve this quarter, then you're not setting ambitious enough goals for the time period. You should really set goals and OKRs that make you feel somewhat uncomfortable and make you question, can we do this? And then lastly, the objective itself should be qualitative. You don't want to put a roof on an objective because who knows, you're still running an experiment to understand what are your bounds, what is your team capable of? And so the last thing you want to do is unintentionally sandbag your objective and set an objective that your team knocks out of the park. You want to make sure that you set an objective that has more of a North Star and is a directional versus having a quantitative ceiling to it. So for those of you who like formulas like myself, there's a simple foolproof formula that I always tell my founders. If you're having trouble writing your first objective, follow this formula, and I haven't yet seen someone fail at it. The formula itself will answer, what do you want to do? And it will be a broad qualitative goal, but it takes a very simple format. You're going to have a verb, you're going to have the what that verb's acting on, and you're going to say the why. Why is this important? Why is this, out of all the things that we can be doing, a top 2 to 3 priority for our startup? An example is increase, so that's your verb. The what are you going to increase? The number of legacy customers migrating from on-premise data centers to public cloud. And the why. Why is it important? In order to improve reliability. This is clear, this is concise, and everyone understands what your North Star is and why it's a top 2 to 3 priority for your company. On the key results, however, they should be quantifiable, measurable milestones. They should lead to an objective, unambiguous grading. And so last thing you want is some sort of ambiguity within how are we going to measure the success, or did we achieve this? They should clearly make the objective achievable or be your best hypothesis for this experiment. So if you're thinking of your OKRs as an experiment, like what are we capable of? What levers will lead to growth for our company? Then they should be your best guess, your best hypothesis in answering, are we clearly making this objective achievable? And then lastly, we all feel victim to this. Your OKRs and your KRs specifically should never be a to-do list. They should never be tactics. They should be focused on the impact. They should be focused on the metric, the high-level metric, the top-level metric that will lead to answering the question, did we achieve this objective? So bringing back our formulas, again, your key result is a quantitative statement that measures the achievement of the objective and will really answer the question, how will we know when we've met our objective? So simple, foolproof formula there. You're going to have a verb. So in this case, increase again. What are you looking to increase? Public cloud only customers. But the one difference here is you're going to have a threshold. You're going to say, where do we start? And what is the level of stretch that we're trying to get to, right? And so in this case, from X to Y, from 350 to 600. Why is it important? Well, a couple things. One, you always want to be explicit around where you're starting, because you're in a startup, you're in a company, things change. People move, people inherit OKRs all the time. They come in the middle of the quarter, they come in for an internship. And so you want that clarity to save you time, right? The last thing you want is for someone to have to ask a question like, where do we start, or where are we coming from? And what is our baseline? Two, you always want to show that level of stretch, because you always want to then return to yourself and say, how does this make me feel? How uncomfortable am I right now? Do I think this is causing a little bit of discomfort? Are we able to achieve this clearly, or is this going to be a stretch goal for my team? Because ultimately, you want to make sure that you are stretching your team, and again, seeing what your team can accomplish. You never want to sandbag. So, defining your OKRs, I often start with myself, honestly. And I think our personal OKRs were coming right out the new year. New Year's resolutions can oftentimes be OKRs. And so I'll use a common example just to make it simple for you, because OKRs should be simple, and you should never feel caught up in the complexity of semantics or word choice. You should really focus on what you're trying to achieve and how you're going to measure the success of that. And so very simple sentence. If you like the sentence structure, I often say, I will. So what is my objective? And then how will I measure? So I will achieve blank as measured by X, right? And those X is your key result, right? And then this makes sure that you don't include what we call our activities or our initiatives, our to-do lists in the objective or the key result. So an example, playing off of New Year's resolutions, what's my objective? Get back into shape in order to be healthier for my longevity, as measured by a decrease in body fat from 5% to X. I left off the X in this case because no need to know where I'm starting from in this case. But you always want to have a baseline where you're trying to get to, as well as, a baseline and also where you're trying to get to. So in this case, decrease in body fat of 5%. And then your activity, right, your to-do list, one of the ideas could be run 5 kilometers every week, right? But what you aren't doing by including your to-do list separately is limiting people's options on how they're going to achieve the objective, right? Because there are a million different ways that I can creatively achieve my key result if you are not being prescriptive around the to-do list and the action and the activity around that. So bringing it back to startups, you can say, hey, we really need to improve our customer experience in order to drive retention and increase our NPS. And so an example could be, I will improve our customer experience in order to drive retention of those customers, as measured by an increase of our NPS, our Net Promoter Score, from 70 to 80. And that could be your key result, right? One of the activities could be implement an in-app live chat. But see, what I didn't do by not being prescriptive around that activity is I allowed for my team, my reports, to figure out how they want to increase our NPS, right? Because what we really care about is increasing our NPS. We don't really care about creative ways to do that, as long as those are sustainable, legal, and ethical. However, you want to leave some room for your employees to be able to be creative and have that autonomy and that agency and figure out how to achieve that KR. So overview, again, if you forget everything that I said before, make sure you just remember this slide. Your objectives are going to answer, what do you want to accomplish? They're going to be qualitative, and they're going to be ambitious, meaningful, and inspiring. Again, for that fresh out of university new hire that you hired last week coming into their first job. And a pro tip, you always want to watch out for weasel words in your objectives. Weasel words are defined as words that are ambiguous in what they mean, right? Because the last thing you want to do is introduce an OKR, an objective that introduces the ambiguity, right? So when I see a founder including words like efficient or effective or sustainable, I always ask them, what do you mean by that? How do you measure efficient? How do you measure effective? How do you measure sustainable? Let's be as specific as possible in what we're trying to achieve and what that North Star really is. On the key results side, again, you want them to be observable, quantifiable, and lack ambiguity in terms of the outcome and how you're going to measure the achievement of that outcome. And they should ultimately answer the question, how do we know if we've succeeded in achieving our objective? Or what is our best hypothesis in this experiment of OKRs that will answer that question? And a pro tip, many of you, particularly in technical roles, will have milestone KRs. We call them milestone KRs. Maybe we want to launch this app, or we want to release this push notification. What I will ask you to really think about is, how can you remove the binary outcome and introduce something that is going to measure the quality of that output, right? Because if you just say release a push notification, I, as a new hire, could say, oh, okay, I can do that. I can do that today, actually, right? But what you really want to also do, what you're trying to drive is maybe your customer satisfaction, or maybe you're trying to drive downloads, right? So your KR should really be that measurable outcome of success, right? Not just the binary action that you're trying to achieve. Then lastly, make sure that you are scoring your OKRs. And a lot of people sometimes set it and forget it, so never fall victim to that. And most importantly, which we haven't touched on, OKRs should always be not directly connected to individual performance evaluations, compensation conversations, because think about this logic again. We'll take the example of the fresh out of university student that you just hired last week. If you told me, set your OKRs, and those OKRs will be what we look at for your end of your performance review, then ultimately, I'm going to set OKRs that I know I can achieve, right? And I'm going to set OKRs that I know I can actually knock out of the park. And so ultimately, that eliminates the drive within an individual to really set things that are stretch goals for themselves, right? And so what you really want to instill in people is this, hey, we're setting these OKRs because we know that they are stretch, and we know that we're going to test how much can we really achieve and what can we really do as a team. We're not going to stand back, right? And so, of course, the sweet spot that I say for scoring of your OKRs is in that 60 to 70 percentile. That's when you know that if you're scoring kind of in the 0.6 or 0.7 on your quarter or half OKRs, then you know that you're stretching your team enough where they still feel like the work they're doing is meaningful and important, but at the same time, not going to remove their motivation by setting something that is a little bit too out of reach to achieve from the start. And of course, how you're setting OKRs, just make sure you don't have too many objectives. You can never have more than 2 or 3 priorities, I would say, as a company or as a top priority, right? At that point, it doesn't become a top priority. As a bigger company, maybe 3 to 5, but as a startup, I would say 2 to 3. Work bottom up and top down. OKRs should really have that buy-in from everyone, and everyone should feel like they have some agency in that. And honestly, as a leader, you don't know what your blind spots are. So you want to make sure that you allow for other people to set what they think their objectives and key results should be. And then you have the reconciliation conversation where you align and understand what blind spots they have in terms of maybe investor conversations or leadership conversations, and what blind spots you have because you're not in the day-to-day weeds. And then, of course, leadership buy-in is key. If you as a leader don't believe in OKRs, there's no way that your team is going to believe in OKRs. And avoid the common pitfalls of miscommunications, of stretch goals, business as usual OKRs. If they're things that you're just actively, passively measuring always, I test you to really think of what is important now today as something that is not just a passive KPI that we always measure, but something that truly is an important, relevant, timely objective that we have for this quarter or this half. Avoid sandbagging, which we talked about, and low value objectives. And then of course, avoid insufficient key results. Allow for a few different ways potentially to achieve that objective. And most importantly, if you remember nothing else, make sure your OKRs are ambitious, make sure they're measurable, and make sure they're transparent. And if you're continuously getting a 1, you're not crushing it, you are sandbagging. And I will always ask you, can you do more? And could we have done more? Thank you.